Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today to our Welcome to Alabama session. My name is Hani, and I'm an Education USA advisor at the Fulbright Commission in Prague. And today we have a special guest, Pranav. Pranav is a Fulbright grantee, currently an English teaching assistant in Gymnasium in Tischno. So thank you for joining us, Pranav, today, and the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you for the introduction, Hani. My name is Pranav, and a little background about myself. I actually was born in India, and I moved to the United States, specifically California, when I was about 5 years old. And I actually didn't know too much English there, but I learned in California. And 10 years later, I moved to the South, to Texas, and I was there about 2 years before I started applying to college. And I ended up applying to University of Alabama in Birmingham, where I studied neuroscience. And the first common question I get is, you studied in California and Texas, but you went to Alabama. Why is that? So I'm going to tell you guys a little story, and I think it's kind of funny. So when I was applying to colleges, I wanted to initially apply for something with a strong science background and something that would let me get a PhD because I was really interested in research. And my dad had heard that my cousin had gone somewhere in Alabama and he heard Birmingham. So I applied there and I got in. And I decided to drive there to take a tour. And the night before my tour, while I was staying in a hotel in Alabama, my dad calls my cousin and says, like, hey, are you ready to come here? Like we would love to have like lunch with you before we visit the college. And she says, oh, I actually went to a different college in Alabama. Like, I don't go there, man. Like, I don't know how you misheard it. So we're over here and we mistakenly come here, but we're already here. So we think we might as well take the tour. And so we go on the tour. And I think the first thing that caught me about Alabama and about UAB was surprise. That's the word I would use to describe my experience, surprising. If anyone who knows anything about the stereotypes of Alabama, there's not very many good things that people think of when I talk about Alabama initially, but going there, I loved it, which is why I was surprised. When I was walking on my tour, a student actually stopped me in the middle of my tour as she heard me talking to my tour guide about my interest in neuroscience, specifically neuroimaging and looking at brain scans for research. And she actually heard me, and a current student stopped me, and she ended up having a 5-minute conversation and she followed me along the tour about how much she loved her research lab, why I should come here, and how she thinks I would be a great fit at the school. And mind you, I don't know this woman at all. She just tags along and just kind of starts telling me about the school and recruiting me as a friend and as a student after knowing me for 5 whole minutes. Very long, right? So this really, I think, was surprising for me, and it struck me with the Southern hospitality. Texas has this as well, but Alabama has a whole new level of this friendliness and this idea of American happiness that I've never seen before. So I was very, very like happy already, and I felt like I was a part of a community in Alabama, even though I had no relationship to it till my tour, really. So I think that's what really made me stand out about my specific school and even Alabama with how friendly people were. And so let me talk a little bit about universities in Alabama. Of course, I will say that my pride is University of Alabama at Birmingham, UAB, but other big and common universities are Auburn University, which is a private institution, and it's actually really, really good for engineering and anything math related. So if that's your jam, Auburn's actually a fantastic university. And there's also a good amount of culture within the city because it's a college town. So everyone's always up and doing things in the city. So if you're active and you really enjoy being outside and having other like-minded young individuals, Auburn is perfect for you and it's a great fit. They have amazing football. And if you watch any American college movies and you see the footballs, the fraternity parties, and even just the great educational experience and just meeting people, and overall a really good Southern hospitality feeling and being around just very nice old people, Auburn is actually amazing because it has a balance of an older population, but also young college students because, like I said, it's a college university and it's got a phenomenal education with their engineering programs offering a lot of internships in Alabama itself and even outside of it. So really good education, but a lot of fun as well. Another big institution is the University of Alabama in Huntsville, which is also pretty big on engineering. And Huntsville is actually one of the fastest growing cities in the United States, believe it or not, especially for anything IT related, engineering related. A lot of people move there for great opportunities and great schooling. And it's also really underrated. Now, speaking of my home institution, UAB, it's really, really known for anything healthcare and science related. So if you're interested in anything sciencey and even some arts actually, and some sociologies and philosophies and social sciences, UAB is pretty well known for this area and has a lot of funding, actually number 3 in funding for research for really sciences. And they're actually on par with Harvard and Yale and those type of prestigious institutions for research funding. So it's an incredibly smart university with a pretty decent size of international population, and UAB loves its international students. We have a pretty good community, and we even have organizations on campus that help international students fit in. I know one organization called Into is specifically designed for international students, where they have a whole office and a whole floor in the library dedicated to them, where students can come and actually meet with fellow American students and also other international students from different parts of the world, which is, I think, amazing. And the University of Alabama, it's going to really give you the American college feel the most, in my opinion. They've got a really big football team. They're actually the most well-known college football team, American football, I should say, in all of United States. And so you're really going to get that Southern feeling of being here. People love their sports. They even go as far as taking off their shirts and writing ALA, like they spell out their university's name for football games. People are always cheering. Anywhere you go, you're going to hear people full of spirit talking about how much they love their school. And it's really good for the fields of business and economics and things of that sort. So if you're interested in starting a business or anything of that sort, University of Alabama is perfect. It's also a pretty big campus. The campus itself is 40,000 people. Just the campus, by the way. So it's a college town as well, and there's just a lot of fun things to do around with lots of hiking and nature nearby as well. So these are a little bit about the universities in Alabama. And the one word I would sum up a lot of universities in Alabama is actually that they're hidden gems, as I like to say, because everyone wants to apply for the more prestigious states that they know of, California's, Texas. I'm from there, but still, like Alabama was probably one of my favorite places because it's really hidden and people don't appreciate the beauty of the state till they're there. And I think it'll give you a completely different field of knowledge and a completely different like experience in the world compared to living in more city areas, like your big cities like New York, California, all those areas. So it's a hidden gem, and I think that there's the most similarities in my experience so far in the Czech Republic to Alabama, weirdly or not, compared to the other places I've lived in.
It's amazing that you're saying it, and it's actually the purpose of these welcome to sessions because, as you said, Czech students usually know the well-known universities, the Ivy League schools, but then they have these perfect schools for engineering, for neuroscience, and they're in Alabama. And I have to say, I haven't worked with a student who would have Alabama University or school on his school list. So I'm glad that we are learning more, and hopefully we will see even schools in Alabama or from Alabama on our students go-to list, Yeah.
I'm glad you added that. And another thing that's surprising is a lot of people who come out of state to go to Alabama think the same thing. And people think I'll only know people from like Alabama who only think one way. That's actually not true because I did mention how they have a decent international population, at least at UAB. And even other schools, they come from a lot of different parts of the United States. Like University of Alabama, for example, has a great amount of people from California, like Nevada and things on the West Coast and the East Coast, like people from Georgia, since it's close by, Florida, Missouri, a lot of close by states actually migrate into Alabama to study there. So it's actually you're gonna still be getting a lot of backgrounds from different areas as well. And my closest friends are from Alabama now, and they don't represent the rest of Alabama at all. Like people think of the stereotypes of racism and all this, and they've never experienced it. And even myself, like as I'm a person of color and I moved from India initially, and it's the most stereotypically racist state that I've lived in. And I've actually never experienced that. On the contrary, I've actually experienced a lot of people trying to learn about my culture, which that really surprised me and threw me in for a loop. And so, and I'm sure there's some parts of Alabama that aren't like that, just to be honest with you, but I have not had that experience. And I know people who would completely come and back me and defend me if anything were to happen of racist remarks. So it's not always true, the stereotypes that you hear, and I just want to make that clear. Another thing that I really like is since Alabama is a smaller state and I think a little less known, it actually comes to an advantage because since there are no huge cities, a lot of the community members are really ingrained in Alabamian culture. So they're more willing to help you and really would like to make you feel a part of their town, their city, and their university, which I don't think a lot of other places can offer. A good example is I was actually struggling a lot in a couple of my neuroscience classes because it's a hard major. And who was there? My professors were always there for me. And they always talked about how they also studied at like smaller schools and how they had a lot of their professors talk to them about coping with mental health and like struggles, but also being there for them as just friends, not just professors, while providing them a great education. And I had the same experience since they've had the same, and that's what helped them a lot. They try to do the same with me, where they really sat me down and made sure I was okay. I remember my organic chemistry class. I was actually struggling, and I was at one point just close to failing actually. And when the teacher actually told me, first off, let's make sure your mental health is okay, and he asked me how I'm feeling. I was really surprised because I thought he was going to offer me help with my grade initially, but he wanted to make sure I was mentally okay first and make sure I was okay on a human level before offering me proper resources at the university to help me succeed. And guess what? I ended up getting the highest grade in the class at the end of the semester. Part of this is because of the support and strength that he gave me, and also how he treated me as like a person before a student, which I really appreciated. I quickly want to talk about a bit of state facts about Alabama because I think we're not known too much about it. The nickname for the state is the Heart of Dixie. It's mainly because it's a very heartful like area, and I don't know too much of the historical context, but I just know like that historically Dixie was a big part of the South, and this is kind of like where a lot of people would say the civil rights movement really took place and took birth of. It's really a historically relevant state, especially Birmingham and Montgomery. For anyone who knows about the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King ended up speaking about the rights for the African American community and the right to vote specifically. And actually a lot of these speeches took place in Alabama, and that's where the whole Civil Rights Museum took place to end slavery or to really not slavery had already ended, but it's really to increase African Americans vote power and also kind of reduce discriminatory practices to some degree, although we still unfortunately do have problems with this. Another cool thing about Alabama is that it's beautiful nature. It's like I said, it's the most similar to Czech because the first thing I was in awe of in the Czech Republic is my gosh, there's so many trees and mountains and just a lot of beautiful nature around. And Alabama actually has a lot of that too. And the places I lived in Texas did not have that. In California, we had that, but you'd have to drive pretty far. Whereas in Alabama, a lot of everywhere you see around is actually filled with greenery and mountains, which kind of resembles my experience in Czech Republic. So you'll still be getting the American feel while feeling like you're close to home in a sense, which I think is honestly a pretty cool experience. So you still feel like you still have that nature and the outdoorsiness that the Czechs love. So I think that's personally wonderful. The capital of the state is Montgomery, and it's got a lot of museums and historical context in it. So if you're interested in history as well, I feel like this would be a great place to study because it's the birthplace of a lot of important civil rights related issues in the United States. I want to, of course, talk a little bit about life in Alabama and the colleges there. One big thing is when you see in the movies the football culture, the sorority and fraternity life of a really close, tight-knit community, having fun together, having a lot of great conversations, and really having that American friendliness and that community that you always see on TV. It's really present in Alabama. One, through the football culture, because they really take pride in wanting their school to win for the games. I know every time I go, I'm not even super into American football, but when I go to football games, I feel like I become a new person. I'm like, let's go, team, let's go. Like, that's not me at all, but it becomes me because of just the culture around. And you really kind of break out of your shell and you kind of learn to communicate better because of this. Like, for me, I was very shy actually coming into college. And I think weirdly enough, the football culture and like just the culture of Alabama and everyone being so friendly made me a lot more open and confident in speaking, which I think will help you in any avenue you choose in any discipline. So I feel like that's such an underrated thing about Alabama, how it really, really does build your communication skills because of how friendly everyone is. You feel a lot more open to trying new things, which I did not think was possible, but it really was in Alabama for me. Kind of with the gem statement that I made earlier about how Alabama colleges are a gem in the United States, they're really hidden. They actually have such an underrated education. I actually had so many opportunities that let me go into very prestigious programs in the United States. I was actually the only freshman who was awarded a Clinton scholarship that let me study for about 2.5 months in a country abroad, fully funded, and it's really internationally acclaimed and well known. And I'm also here on the Fulbright program, which is another great program that the Alabama education system actually acknowledged me and showed me to apply to. So it's really, really good. And I was the only freshman too in the program, whereas everyone else was a lot older than me. So I'm just saying the education is very, very underrated and it's incredible. I'm also like working in a lab where as a 18-year-old at the time, I was one of the first people to start working in a lab where I got to literally do brain scans on patients and I got to learn about how to analyze them. As someone who studies neuroscience and working with a freaking MRI machine, I don't think you can say a lot of places offer that, but I was fortunate enough to get that. And people think that Alabama is so rural and there's not much science there. I proved that wrong, and I think it's definitely a myth. And I think it's really underrated for the education opportunities that they provide you. It's also on a really nice countryside of United States. So that means anytime on a weekend, if you're free, grab a friend and go on a hike, grab a friend, go on a mountain trail, like go rock climbing if you're bored. There's so many naturey things that you're never going to be bored, really. I was never bored because every weekend, me and my friends would do something new outdoorsy while also still being back on campus and enjoying the campus activities and all the things they had to provide, while still getting to enjoy myself and relax and not feel stressed by going out and looking at the beautiful trees and plants all around me. It's got great nature, like I mentioned, which for me was a big deal, especially being in the Czech Republic. I know there's a lot of nature here. You won't miss out on that if you go to Alabama. And most importantly, there are very, very kind people. Anytime I'm walking by the street, somebody always says howdy and stops me and has a 10-minute conversation about something super random, and I love it. And I go back excited, tell my friends, and we all talk about how many people we met this day. In fact, it's so open that every time I went to a coffee shop, I had this habit of talking to strangers and asking them what I called Pranav's deep philosophical questions. And the crazy part is, anywhere else, I feel like people would be like, why is he talking to me? In Alabama, people are like, let me tell you what I think. And they give me a solid 20, 30-minute conversation. In fact, the longest conversation I've had was actually an hour and a half with strangers that I had never met. That's the beauty of being in Alabama. Just you get to talk to anyone and you get to open your mind up to so many different views and so many different types of people, which I'm grateful that I experienced.
That's
Another,
amazing.
sorry.
May I jump in? Like my question as an international student would be, so coming from the Czech Republic, flying in, where would I end up? Like, are there any international airports close by, or how would you kind of navigate this journey from the Czech Republic?
That's a great question. I'd say unfortunately, there's no big international airport in Alabama, but there's one really close by in Atlanta in Georgia. And
Mhm.
so you would normally fly into there and probably just drive out, or take like a bus to Alabama, which isn't too bad, from my experience.
Okay, perfect. Right, great.
Oh, sorry. The last thing I really wanted to add is, and I don't think it's spoken enough, is I think understanding how the world is shaped politically in different areas is incredibly important. I think in any field you go to. And I think something that I was actually a little fortunate to experience in Alabama was how there is a lot of like poverty in certain areas in Alabama, which seems bad, but it's also, I think it opens your mind up to the realities of the world, which I didn't experience. Like for me, going to Alabama, experiencing the poverty line and seeing other people struggling on the street, there's not, I'm not gonna say there's like a lot of homeless people or anything like that, but you will see more poverty issues in Alabama than you might in other areas. Or it might be more recognizable, but it might actually even be less poverty, but it might seem like it's more just because of the area and the stereotypes that are given. But it's honestly such a blessing in disguise because I got to volunteer so much and help out these communities. And I think like you really learn a lot more about the world and start appreciating all the small things in life that you might not have had beforehand. Like for me, I didn't think having food on my plate was important till I volunteered at a hospital where people had health issues and didn't even have proper food. Like I think that made me appreciate the value of living and food a lot more, but also really have conversations with people and build a community with people who really need it and who are struggling. And so I think it really, I think you get the best of both worlds where you feel like you can contribute to the world, but also learn a lot and have an eye-opening experience in Alabama, which I think is very underrated and incredibly useful.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. So thank you so much for sharing, Pranav. I really hope that students consider Alabama as a state to go because it sounds interesting. I do love the neuroscience major, and you really showed us how many opportunities you got in Alabama at your higher education institution. So if you guys have any additional questions, feel free to reach me through email under advisor@fulbright.cz. If you have questions for Pranav, you can also send an email and I'll be happy to forward it to him. Or you can easily post your questions on our social media under EducationUSA Czech. So thank you so much for joining us today, Pranav. Thank you all for watching, and hopefully you will get to experience this wonderful state as well. Thank you. Bye.